accidents were bound to happen, and they did. So then I changed my tune very quickly after that. Yeah.
You guys might remember the Not So Tiny Home from my series where I profile unique Airbnb stays. Now, after my episode where I profiled the Not So Tiny Home, there were many questions that came in regarding the building process of a tiny home. So although the specs of the Not So Tiny Home are slightly larger than that of a typical tiny home, I thought I'd come back today to interview the man behind the build to get answers to the questions that you guys have sent me. And I thought it would be fun to do it in somewhat of a structure by asking Tristan what he wished he knew before he went about certain elements of the building cycle. We will start by discussing the actual build and what would have saved him time and money.
Those are kind of things you just don't see coming.
We'll then rewind and discuss what would have been helpful to know in the design phase of the Not So Tiny Home.
Everything was new. Everything was a challenge when it came to that.
We'll then discuss the sourcing of materials and where you could go wrong, which could skyrocket costs.
And I didn't realize how wet the stuff is.
We'll then move inside and discuss the furnishings of a tiny home.
We struggled so much to find a couch that would fit the space.
And we'll end off by discussing outsourcing and whether it is a good idea to build a tiny home completely by yourself.
It's so precise, it comes out to the millimeter, and then I'll just put it together.
Can you tell me a bit about what you wish you knew before building this thing?
I wish I knew a lot of things when that came to that, because I just kind of jumped into the deep end with this thing. I mean, I built a skateboard half pipe here, and I built a pirate ship, and I thought, I'd build a little house. The project just grew and grew and grew. So one of the first things that you become very aware of is like, hell, I don't even have the right tools for this job, actually. The amount of tools that I bought, I could probably sell all the tools I have now to some house manufacturing guy, and he doesn't have to buy another bloody thing.
So let's talk about tools. A build like this uses tools like spades, saws,
a battery-operated screwdriver, because you can't have leads running all over the place and up and down ladders. You just you'll tie yourself up in knots.
And if you're wondering how he got the joists together, he started off with an impact driver.
So about halfway through, I changed from using the impact driver to buying a nail gun, and that was a complete revelation. I mean, it's just like 10 times faster. It's just like bang, 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 as opposed to digging into a tool bag to get a screw, load it, put it in. It was absolutely a game changer. I mean, hell, if I'd only known that up front, but then I had to buy an air compressor as well.
And could you easily source the tools you needed?
A lot of the tools needed for this particular job, especially the metal roof sheeting and the metal wall cladding, and a lot of the process that needed bending, specific tools, and also cutting. So like a left hand cutting blade, right hand cutting blade, straight, special crimping tool. It's just not available here. So I didn't realize, I just thought you could go to the hardware store and buy the various types of, which to me were basic kind of tools. I had to import, and that I didn't realize. So, and then one or two I had to actually have specifically made. So go to an engineer's shop and they had to make it up.
With what seems to be a mammoth amount of necessary tools, how do you access them during a build?
Half the time you're off the ground, right? More than half the time. And then you're needing all these tools with you all the time. So you got a screwdriver, you got a hammer, you got the nails and the screws, the various sizes and types, a piece of timber in your hand, and then okay, how do I keep all this equipment with me? So then you start looking at what kind of tool belt to buy, and then it doesn't have enough pockets and you buy another tool belt.
It must have also taken you quite long, because you might think, I can wake up and just start building, but it's not. It's you wake up, you have to get yourself up with all of the tools, make sure that the safety's going. I mean, that probably takes like a good 2 or 3 hours, and then you can only start, and then you're exhausted and it's tea time.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I mean, okay, that's a little exaggeration, but it did take extra time. It took a lot of extra time every day, and just like deciding what you're going to need for the next half an hour or hour, just loading up, and then you're going to forget something. It's like back down the ladder and go and get it. The amount of times I crossed over this garden to the garage to get stuff I'd forgotten, I probably walked a trench through the lawn, so there's something to be said for repeating process, and I wasn't repeating anything. So everything was a first time approach. So it's just learning curve constantly. And also just, building on a 45-degree pitched roof. I needed a ladder that I could walk on the roof, because you can't walk on a 45-degree angled flat roof. It's a smooth roof even, so you'll just slide right off the thing. So I had to reconstruct a ladder, repurpose a ladder that could hook on the edge of the house, on the other side of the ridge actually, so it didn't crumple the ridge, because that was quite a delicate kind of construction piece anyway. And then the safety aspect creeps in, so because I built this for over such a long period, and doing it myself meant that I was up and down a ladder personally many times, and at some point you're going to stuff it up, you're going to put a foot wrong, and that's where I had a couple of accidents like that.
Talk to us a little more about what insight you gained in terms of safety.
So safety brought in another element of complications, of complexity, so now you've got a harness around you with a rope and shackles, and you're up and down the ladder and trying to get the rope and the tools out. It was just so that's where I think more scaffolding would help, because you wouldn't need as much security with ropes and stuff in case you fell, but it's a consideration, definitely. It's actually safety first, and I was risking it all. I was like kind of free climbing, and there's a saying, you get old climbers and you get bold climbers, you don't get old, bold climbers. And that's the kind of thing I was kind of doing, it's just like leaning out there on a ladder with a hammer in my hand, and accidents were bound to happen, and they did. So then I changed my tune very quickly after that.
So tools and processes, or lack thereof, seemed to slow down the build quite a lot at the beginning. But how much of the delay was due to the specifics of the design of the not so tiny home?
I was so fixated on the design, on the look that I wanted, that it overrode in my understanding, like a bit of a shortcoming in the build process. So the way I have the gutter set up, it needed to go on before I put the roof on, but before I put the gutter on, I had to put the wall on, so I had to put the wall finishing on. So effectively I had all the exterior walls done before the roof went on. And I was building through multiple seasons, so things got wet. Not critically, not became a problem. The only thing that did become a problem was the construction floor that I had, which originally was going to be the floor that I was going to put my final floor finish on. But because it got wet so often, it warped out of shape, and I had to redo that, or put another proper layer on top of that. So that was probably my biggest shortcoming, was the actual process of the outside cladding of the house. Doing it again, I would definitely have to, going forward, let go of some of my particular design details that I was like kind of hung up on. I would redo it that the roof could go on first, and then the gutter, and then the wall cladding. So, then everything doesn't get completely drenched in the downpour. You don't have to stress too much about that.
So before we get into what you would have done differently in the design process, are you happy with the outcome of your self-built not so tiny home?
So at the end of the day, I got the look that I wanted, but at what cost? And I think the cost was too high in terms of just things getting wet when they didn't have to. I could have had the roof on a long time ago and then worked in a nice dry environment. Because it was an open shell, I still had to have my tool shed effectively in the garage, but otherwise I could have been working underneath a roof cover. You got to really think through the build process before you commit to something like in stone. Be a little bit flexible, I think, to make the job go a bit easier.
So Tristan, can you tell me what is something you wish you knew before you started the design process for the not so tiny home?
The house had to fit with what we had. So there were tons of, one could get really creative and create something that looked like a design pod that belonged on the moon, for instance. But, I really needed this thing to fit in with what we had, and at the same time make it a little bit edgy. So that involved a lot of material research, which I didn't really factor in the amount of effort that took to find all these new materials, or new to me anyway, because I've spent most of my life on a drawing board designing retail space. So crossing that into a building home kind of environment was very different for me. So and so some of the design elements that caught me out were silly things like cross ventilation upstairs in the loft. I thought a big window that I put in there would have been completely fine. It was still, the heat just didn't escape with one window. You need cross ventilation. So then I had to buy an aircon, and then that was an afterthought. So how hide the pipes as best you can and make the job tidy. It just takes a lot of time trying to think of all the potential problems that are going to arise from the design. And like downstairs in the kitchen area, going forward again, I probably would build in a tumble dryer or dishwasher. Yes, those kind of things I didn't think I would need, but for longer stay people, for instance, they probably would want those kind of things. Otherwise they're going to the laundromat or everything's done by hand. And I've watched a lot of new footage since I kind of built this place, and a lot of the places seem to have these smaller dishwashers. I haven't personally seen one here in South Africa, like a half-size dishwasher, but I'm sure you do get them. Fitting out the kitchen, I like to bring in symmetry, which kind of tidies up the space as well. It makes it less cluttered. And at some point, I just completely forgot about remembering the size of the convection oven, and I got so involved with dividing the kitchen up into 4 equal compartments, and then built it as such, and then like, oh hell, I need to fit the convection oven in here. I hope it fits, and it was too big, the one I had, because now we have 2 in our main house, and we still didn't have a convection here. So it was like, oh man, I was just rushing around to all these like homemade places and looking for a convection oven, and hook and by crook, we found one that actually the hole was made for it. So that was pure luck, complete luck. So that saved the day for that one. Yeah, so I think going forward, maybe I should have bought all the equipment and then run with that list. So but I was so fragmented with like trying to do everything. Yeah, so I think just trying to build, furnish, equipment, kit the place up with the right equipment, lighting. At some point I'm going to drop the ball because I didn't really have a proper job jar of list of things to actually tick off. I was just kind of winging it as I went along, but it kind of, at the end, it came together, thankfully. But those are some of the serious considerations, I think, is to actually maybe have a proper list of all the things you're wanting to put into the place and work around some of them. Some of them you can design by yourself, custom make, but that also attracts another cost. Okay, so then also now I'm building with a totally different medium to the current house. So I've used timber here, and I'm trying to create some of the elements that the brick house has, like for instance the round window, but now that has to be made out of timber and not just trialed on plaster, which I think is a lot easier perhaps. So that had a whole bunch of other new challenges, and it's expensive as well. So anything round or out of the ordinary, which round probably would be, is going to be a little bit pricier, to attract a different price. And then any dressing to that, like if you want a timber windowsill, that's going to have to be round as well. And that's going to be expensive. So, if you're doing it yourself and you're capable, fine, but it's just going to take a lot of extra time, to actually make that. And then there are no blinds for round windows essentially. So then you're going to break the whole round format with a horizontal flip and roller blind, or you're going to pay a fortune for an inset timber blind, louver blind, but then the blinds are always in the window space, so you don't have a completely open window ever. So yeah, there were those kind of things. If I had to do it again, I wouldn't make a round window. It'll be a square or a rectangle, definitely not round.
Listen, what are some of the things you wish you knew when it came to sourcing materials for the build of the Not So Tiny Home?
So a lot of my research and everything for building this place was looking at other people's YouTube channels, and most of this stuff is overseas based, so a lot of the detailing, a lot of the product, the vibe that I was trying to get, it's mostly overseas. So then you try now you got to try and find a substitute here in South Africa, and it's very difficult. There's just a lot of stuff that's not really available. Like, the timber we have is construction timber, which is what the place is going to be built out of. And I didn't realize how wet the stuff is. It'll wet paper. If you push paper onto it, it'll be damp. So when that eventually dries and you haven't fixed it into place properly yet, or it's just sitting in outside, it changes shape and it shrinks. 100 mil would shrink down to about 96 millimeters. And then, every piece does that as well. So the shortcoming of that was you've built with rustic materials, and then the other consideration is you want to now include engineered materials onto a rustic kind of base. The yin and yang are not really working together here. The other thing I wish I knew was maybe a little bit more understanding of the product limitations. So I went to a company that supplied all the metal roof sheeting, as well as they would do all the form bending for me and stuff. So the gutters I ultimately wanted in one length, but then the bending machine could only take a maximum length of 6 meters, and my gutters were 6.1. And the house design was already built, the platform was already made. So had I known that ahead of time, the house would have been 100 millimeters narrower or shorter rather, because now I've got a joint in the middle of the gutter, which is not ideal. I didn't really want that. So, and there was just no way else around that. And then also the clip lock system, the one I used, was fraught with challenges. It was easy to install, but it didn't have any kind of adjustability going through it. So yeah, that was just a complete challenge from start to finish, putting that on. So I would have changed the profile had I known the shortcomings of the profile I'd selected. And that's a whole experience thing as well. I mean, this is the first time that I've done this, so I wasn't to know.
What really blows me away about this place is not only the exterior aesthetics, it's also the interior. I really am a fan of the furnishings. So Tristan, I just want to know if you could have done anything differently, or if you could know something now, back then, what would you have changed when it came to the furnishings of the space?
Okay, when it comes to furnishings, I didn't think it was going to be as challenging as it potentially was, because I just thought I'd buy most of the stuff. To be honest. But yeah, once you start looking around, and I mean, like the couches, for instance, we struggled so much to find a couch that would fit the space. And then it was either too big or it was too small, because the space is like limited. Problems will compound, you won't be able to get to the stairs properly or something like that. And then there's also no storage facility in the couch. And then it also has to be a sleeper. How can you move it around? Is it rigid? And we just never found anything that actually worked, even the wall unit, So it just ended up like, man, this is another job jar I have to now do. Buy some more tools, with a table saw at the end of the day, and that's not a cheap investment. So now make furniture, And then you also have to source out someone to upholster, because that's something I don't do. I'm not upholstering anything. And but it kind of worked out, but it's difficult to foresee that, I mean, you could hunt around and you find special pieces, but they also might cost a damn fortune. So I think building it yourself, at the end of the day, it took longer, but you get exactly what you want. So yeah, that's a consideration. Either buy the furniture and build around the furniture, or design around the furniture, or be prepared to custom build stuff, or have stuff custom built. So if you're not doing it yourself and you're outsourcing it, it's going to attract a cost, and way more than buying something, I think.
So we've discussed quite a lot of the building process or the building cycle, but I'm curious if you considered outsourcing. Would you perhaps outsource a part of this, or did you outsource any part of this? What are some things that you have to say when it comes to outsourcing?
So yeah, I did outsource a very small amount of things. So, I got a tiler in to do the tiling. I really, really don't enjoy wet work. It's just like something I don't enjoy at all. I put up all the plasterboarding, but I got another guy to do the skimming of the plasterboard. I watched many videos on guys showing you how to do it. No ways, I'm not getting involved. That is such a skill, and the learning curve on that is, I mean, these guys are artisans, so I'm not going to try and become an artisan in a week or two, so I'd rather just outsource that. But it didn't really, if I had to build another one, I probably wouldn't even do plasterboard, because it has its own problems, so because it's a timber house and it moves quite a lot, there are a lot of little fine cracks that you maybe haven't noticed yet because of the plasterboarding, and it's just timber, it moves, so I do hard finishes next time. I outsourced the windows. Someone else made the aluminium windows for me, and they put them into the openings, but then I dressed all the openings myself, because that was pretty design specific, and I didn't really trust anybody to pull those designs off the fitting in of the window properly.
So now for the big question, would you build another not so tiny house?
I wouldn't build a timber frame house again, I think, with our South African pine. It's just the way I like to have it finished inside. You see a lot of the homes that I've watched overseas, the timber there is like, it's dry, it's properly cured, and it doesn't really shrink and carry on like ours and twist and warp. And so I'd probably go for a steel frame, and then I would outsource the actual framing of that, because it's so precise. It comes out to the millimeter, and then I would just put it together, and then the rest I would still do myself. But yeah, I wouldn't do another timber frame again. So I probably could sell my nail gun now and sell the compressor. But yeah, steel framing I think is the answer for something like this, because it's so precise and it stays like that. So
if you have found this video helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. My treat, I will leave the Airbnb profile of the Not So Tiny Home in the end screen for you to check out after this video. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more content from me in the future, and good luck if you're thinking about building your own tiny home. See you in the next video. Take care. Bye.